Welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission, where I'm joined by inspiring leaders driven by the impact of creating a healthy and sustainable world. Now, in today's episode, I'm joined by Dan Cosgrove, CEO of Growers Edge, an innovative fintech company providing innovative financial solutions to the ag industry. And I've got to know Dan pretty well over the last few years around the world at various kind of AgTech events. And Dan, it's a privilege to have you come on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Great, Simon. Thanks for reaching out. So much of the pandemic is unfortunately been losing connection. So I'm pleased to continue ours and happy to answer your questions today.
Excellent, excellent. So let's take it all the way back, Dan, maybe giving some thought and consideration to the kind of early influences on a young kind of Dan as you were growing up.
Well, I don't know how far back you want to go. Obviously, there's always family and friends and teachers that you have going back. I guess one thing I would point out is I loved science and math early as a kid, and so whether that was my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Scoville, or 7th grade teacher, David Law, or even into high school, some of the nuns that I went to school with. I loved science and math, and even though, and we'll maybe talk about this, I diverted a little bit of my effort into the legal world, there was still a science and math background that I tried to keep, and I think that's helped me both in the startup world today that we're focused on at Growers Edge, but always my interest. And so, yes, I could probably list every science and math teacher I had from 1st grade all the way through high school and college.
Those are great. And what about kind of parental kind of influences? What did your folks do?
So mom and dad, they're both still alive, and they're doing well. Even though I don't visit them enough, they tell me almost every week. But dad is or was an attorney. He's 91 years old, and mom managed to keep us in line as a housekeeper. But they both, I think, imparted different things. Dad obviously was an attorney, and so probably one of the inspirations for me to go to law school is certainly that angle. Now, they worked hard, and he brought home files every night and worked till he fell asleep in the chair. But I would go in on the weekends and play around at the office, and thought it was really interesting. And still to this day, try to stay involved in the legal side, including in other startups. And then mom, at the same time, had a fantastic sense of humor. Again, still does, but forced us to toe the line, and we could get in trouble if we didn't do things right. So good discipline on the work side, good discipline on the home front. But both of those two supported me every step of the way, whatever I wanted to do. In fact, they never urged me to go to one school versus the other, or one major over the other. They just supported us, myself and my brother, really throughout the course, even to this day. I had the opportunity to drive up there yesterday or over the weekend, and again, always a very positive conversation, and love them both very much, and blessed that they're still both with us.
Absolutely. You said is your dad still an attorney? Does he still maintain kind of working interest at 91?
He's 91 years old. He does have an office that he goes to almost every day. I wish he wouldn't, but he does. And it's a floor below where his old law firm still is to this day. So he stays out of it, but he likes to have a little bit of something to do every day. And I think that keeps him and my mom sane, just a little bit of separation there. But he stays involved a little. He's involved with both the church and the community. But obviously, as he gets up to 91 years old, it's a little bit more difficult to stay involved in the day-to-day. But boy, I hope I'm going like he is when I'm 91, and really am continually impressed with both him and mom and their ability to kind of keep the wheels on in the course of not just getting older, which is a challenge enough, but in the middle of what has been a really challenging year and a half.
Absolutely. I'm sure, Dan, when you're 91, you'll have a little office you'd like to pop to as well, I'm sure.
Right.
Right. But no, that's great. So tell me, I mean, so when you think about going down the legal route, for instance, you know, that must have been quite heavily influenced by what you saw with your dad. You must have been quite impressed with those files he brought back, and was that more of a passion than the science and the maths, for instance?
Um, well, I started out, Simon, first as an engineering major, and graduated with a degree of engineering. And I had every intent to do that, and again enjoyed it tremendously, but recognized, I think, that science and math of itself, to sit there and work on those problems, while interesting, didn't quite scratch the itch for me. And so, again, I think you're astute in pointing out that my ability to see what Dad did on the legal side really showed me, proved to me that sometimes the real fun things are at the intersections. It's the intersection of math and science with something else. And in my case, it happened to be math and science and law. And so I remember going to a law in engineering course at Iowa State. It was by far and away probably one of the more favorite courses I took. And at that point in time, I realized, maybe right out of undergrad, what I ought to try first is law school. And so I applied, got into law school, and obviously the rest is history, but really continue to this day to look for the overlaps, because I do think, either from a personal level or just as far as creating value, it's oftentimes where two things intersect that most value is created.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. So you had a really successful career, right, in the legal profession, and a hotshot lawyer, and partner at your law firm, and then you kind of found agriculture, right? And you got to move, and you made the move to DuPont, I think, right? So
That's correct.
tell me, was that planned from your viewpoint? Was it the plan to eventually go inside and take your skills and go and apply them at a corporate level?
Yeah, well, number one, I first correct you. Certainly not a hot shot by any stretch of the
Come
imagination,
on.
but worked really well with a great set of attorneys at a local firm here in town that's now called McKee, Voorhees and Cease, and again, a fantastic firm that is and was focused on intellectual property, which, as you know, is an overlap of science and technology on one side and law on the other. And while I focus primarily on trial work, which was just more fun to me, that certainly was a great experience with great mentors there, and partners. And yes, I became partner of the firm. But my plan, to your question, was really always to be an in-house or an outside attorney first, work my way in-house, and then, at that time down in the future, somewhere down the road, become that law professor. So I was trying to think of those three things I was going to do. And so I was on that track, no doubt. So I was 9 or 10 years at McKee, Voorhees and Cease, pretty good time there. Had some fun trials that I got to work with. And the last trial I worked on, I was representing a company called Pioneer Hybrid at the time. Pioneer, as you know, was just acquired by DuPont. And the CEO of Pioneer at the time, a guy named Rick McConnell, Dr. Rick McConnell, said, "Hey, would you entertain the idea of coming and working in-house with Pioneer?" And I really kind of jumped at the idea. Number one, it was on that track that I mentioned. It was the next step. And I was thinking in 10-year increments. So that was positive. I think the other positive, or the issue that moved me in that direction, was it was at the time where my children, or my oldest at least at the time, was starting to ask where Daddy was every week, because I would be traveling a lot. I would be at trials, taking depositions, on a plane quite a bit. And I hated that question, just drove me crazy. So Pioneer was in town. It is and remains a great company with great people. And the opportunity to represent them in-house, I jumped at. Absolutely. Now, the danger there, and there's always a danger with any move, is it's in an area of science where I did not have a lot of background in. my training was math and engineering. It was not biotech or breeding. And so the first year or two, and maybe this is something you'll see as we go through this conversation, I spent a lot of time teaching myself. What about biotechnology? What about genetics? To the point where one of my partners, I remember mentioning a couple things to her back when I ran into her a year or so afterwards, and she was amazed. Either she thought I was really slow and would never pick it up, or didn't think I would put the time in, but was amazed at how fast you can teach yourself and continually learn about new things as you try them out.
Okay, no, great. Absolutely. There's a hell of a lot to learn there. And I'd figure, knowing you, you probably like the intellectual rigor and challenge of learning something new, right? I figured that was probably one of the attractions for you as well.
It definitely was. I remember I bought a book. I can't remember who wrote it, but it was called The Cartoon Guide to Genetics.
Right.
I still have that on my bookshelf. And it did a good job. It was good enough for me as an in-house counsel. So, but I do enjoy learning new things, and hopefully continue that to today.
Yeah, no, great. And within your career, you moved from legal, from broad legal and IP, and into a broad kind of business development role. And I've always been really fascinated by that background. Having the legal background when I'm hiring for chief business officer roles, and you've got the legal background as well. And it was interesting to see. Maybe just talk through, the move you made there from legal to business, and maybe outline a little bit around how your career developed there.
Yeah, so of all the changes that we will likely talk about or have talked about, the move from a legal role to a business role was probably the hardest for me. And it was in part because of that history that we've already talked about. My dad was an attorney. I had an uncle that was an attorney, probably about 8 cousins that are attorneys. There's a lot of Cosgroves in the list of attorneys, at least in the state of Iowa and beyond. And so leaving a profession that you have trained for, taken the bar exam for, and worked in for 10 years plus was not an easy decision. But again, it was offered to me by another one of my mentors, a guy named Dr. John Bedbrook. And he was really asking me to move from a legal role to a business role. To DuPont's credit, while they supported it, I got calls from the highest levels of the organization to stay in the legal role. The general counsel of DuPont at the time, a guy named Tom Sager, called me up and said, are you sure? I said, yeah, I'm sure. And so we made the jump, and that was hard. But again, I ran into Simon in some areas where I wasn't as smart about something that I thought I needed to be. And actually, that's when I decided to go to business school, was to learn about financial documents, to read business reports, read P&L statements and cash flows, do modeling, things that are important to folks on the business side, but they don't really teach very well in both engineering school or law school.
Yeah, no, got it. Yeah, absolutely. So really, with that move, you're going from an engineering, let's think about disciplines, from an engineering kind of mindset into the legal profession, learning kind of agriculture, genetics, traits, and everything you need to know for that business, and then learning a broad set of financial kind of competence and skills that you needed to develop as well, right? So, yeah, very, very interesting.
Yeah. So, does that define me as a lifelong learner? I don't know, but certainly, it was part of the attraction actually for trying the new things, was the ability to perhaps dive into a new area with some really good folks. I mean, to go from a lawyer in a firm with some well-regarded attorneys into a well-regarded Fortune 500 company as an in-house counsel, a great opportunity. Very few people would pass that up under any set of circumstances. And then to be offered a business role in that same company, and then have the ability to go to a top 10 business school in the process. Again, learn more from the experts there. I've really lucked into these steps as I go, and have been able to hopefully take full advantage of them.
No, that's great. I think it probably helps having someone that really believes in you, that wants you to take that step. And as a mentor, right? Someone that you trust, that, you know, is giving you that feedback and making that decision a bit easier for you. I would have
Sure.
thought, probably.
Yeah, no, and that may go back. In fact, I didn't even think about it till you just said that. Maybe that goes back to mom and dad, always being positive and reaffirming. It certainly goes into the teachers that you've had throughout your career, the mentors, whether that was Ed Cease at the law firm, whether that was Dan Jacoby and the legal group at Pioneer, John Bedbrook as a business leader at Pioneer, or even now some of our investors. When you're making a move, having people that believe in you, support you, and in some instances invest in you is a big positive, and something that I'm lucky to have had for sure.
Well, that's great. That's great. And maybe just reflect on, when you think about your role there over the 7 or 8 years that you were there, you know, maybe a position or a role that you did that you look really back fondly on, as, you know, having good impact, for instance.
You mean at Pioneer or Corteva?
Yeah.
Certainly one of the roles I look back with a lot is when they asked me to, as a lawyer, lead the patent group. Again, I was not as smart or gifted at the technology as the other 19 or 20 people that were in that group, but the ability to step into a role, trust them on things, them trust me on certain things, and build a really solid team that was probably one of the best in the industry as far as getting patents, getting through office actions, creating value for the company. Number one, someone believed in me to give me that role, and number two, the team certainly rallied, and we performed, and we did really well, and it enabled me then to move on to the next one. But having some success, to whatever degree, whether those are small wins or big wins, having some success is important at each role. To, number one, to prove that you can do it, and then number two, to get the confidence you can get to make the next step in your career.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for that. And tell me, were you always you know, at what point did you have it in your mind that you wanted to be a CEO?
Well, don't tell anyone at DuPont this, but while I was going to business school, while working at DuPont, you are surrounded by people that are very engaged at either developing new products or working on their own company or trying to come up with new ideas. Especially, I had the luck of attending a business school in Boston, which is just a huge incubator of ideas and companies and concepts and leaders. And when you surround yourself by those folks, you tend to get the itch. And certainly, when I graduated from there in 2015, immediately my thought was, all right, how can I get a piece of this? Because it's too fun, too engaging of an effort not to at least try once in your career. And of course, I wasn't getting any younger, so we had to find one that really grabbed my interest. But that was when it happened, Simon, is you go to a school like MIT and you're surrounded by brilliant people. The people in my class were fantastic. We had everyone from people that have launched billion-dollar companies, and I mean billion-dollar companies, so these are billionaires, to Navy SEALs, to people that were launching a new company just to sell chocolate. Incredible diversity across the group. In fact, to this day, we still keep in touch. As frequently as every Saturday night, a few of us get together on the phone just to kick stuff around every Saturday night. So, but yeah, that was where I got the itch. And make sure that your us listeners know that shouldn't be a reason not to send people to business school. It maybe didn't play out perfectly for DuPont, but I had the best time. Wouldn't have made any other decision in the world. And it for a time certainly made me a better employee, I think, of DuPont.
Definitely. No, there's always a holistic thing to consider with that. But it does sound like it was a really impactful, important time in your career. And, in terms of the networks and, as you say, surrounding yourself with that different level of energy. And I'm curious, around that time, clearly the Aptek revolution is starting to kind of gather pace as well, right? So you're starting seeing a lot of startups and innovation models kind of appearing in the Agtech world as well. So
Yeah.
It's a perfect storm almost, wasn't it?
I was certainly lucky to experience a number of kind of eras in ag tech. I came into the role of pioneer just when the kind of the GM Roundup Ready yield guard type efforts were happening. In fact, that was the area where most of my practice was focused at in the litigations that were happening at the time between all of the major companies. Later, we were certainly on the early edges of the digital ag revolution, with the acquisition of Granular by Corteva at the time. A lot of the activities as part of my roles at DuPont Pioneer were related to venture space, and so I got to interact with a lot of really great companies and startup founders and CEOs. So again, the right time, the right place at the right time might be a good tagline for me at some point, but again, continue to feel really fortunate that I was in both the positions I was and the roles I was in at the time where things were really happening on the ag tech side.
Yeah, no, great. So tell us about Growers Edge then, the vision and the mission of the company.
Yeah, so Growers Edge, as you maybe led with a little bit, is a fintech company that is really focused on agriculture. And our mission statement is to empower growers to adapt and thrive. And there's a lot of people solving similar type issues. Throughout the course of my career, however, two stuck out at me that hadn't attracted a lot of new attention. One was risk management, or dealing with risk that farmers have to deal with every day. And they do that while working hard and putting food on their own tables. They are producing our food globally. So risk management, risk mitigation was one area that I thought really was underserved. And at the same time, access to capital, access to credit. So it seems that there are a lot of fintech efforts across the US, for example, that are directed to student loans and car loans and new mortgages and metal credit cards and really cool, fun stuff. But for whatever reason, a lot of those have flown over agriculture. And hopefully we're building two very important parts to move into agricultural fintech that set us up really well for future activity, really across the board as it relates to helping farmers and working primarily through ag retail, helping ag retailers stay focused on the things that really matter and move the needle for growers.
Oh, that sounds great. And tell me, just from a risk management viewpoint, when I think about that, clearly something like weather comes to mind, especially over the last few years with some of the kind of challenges. Maybe give me a broader view on, what that kind of means to the farmer.
Well, weather is one of those really key variables that impact them day to day that they have no control over. You think about the big variables in ag, weather would be at the top, different farming practices might be, a close second. But you got a lot of variability around soil and genetics and all, are you unlucky enough for a hailstorm that day that could not have been possibly predicted? And so we're getting much better at bringing in data from a lot of sources and predicting what could happen. It's still a prediction, and there is always a chance, as we know from looking at our own weather reports every night, there's always a chance it's wrong. Yeah. And so how do you help a farmer get through those variables in the best way possible? And it seemed to me at the time, and again, this might be from my business school days, that the economics of it, you can take variability and turn it into something that is advantageous. And that's really one of our models, is how you can take variability and bring it to agriculture in a way that you might never be able to predict what's going to happen on a single farm, but you certainly can predict what is likely to happen across a statistical number of farms, and use those statistics and those economics to help farmers deal with the risk that they face every day.
Got it. Okay. And tell me, were there those kind of options out there in the marketplace? Risk management, financial kind of options. Do they exist out there?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I like to think we live in a industry, both in those areas where it is well served by some slower moving incumbents. On the access to capital side, you do have ag lenders out there that are serving the market, but they're not digitized. They're not bringing any of these new cool tools and technologies that might be found in other parts of FinTech and bringing them to agriculture. And in fact, sometimes I even like to say what someone thinks is digitized now is nothing more than a fillable PDF. And that's not where we need to be. That's not where we need to get to really bring solutions here. So we are launching, in fact, probably about the same time as you and I are having this conversation, signing our first deal for an agricultural lending offer. And it will be digitized. It'll be something that really is new to the industry. And then on the risk side, again, the risk management group of the USDA does a fantastic job of providing multi-peril crop insurance, things that are generic, things that are very helpful to the farmer, in fact, very highly subsidized. So it would be impossible for someone like myself to come in with a product that does better than that. And in fact, we require our customers to get that. It's so good. But can it be more? Can you take a program that is really designed as a safety net and then use it to reward practices like maybe buying a new technology or following a preferred practice? That's what we're trying to incentivize by the adoption of some of our warranty-backed recommendations. So yeah, there are people doing the same thing and doing a very good job, making quite a bit of money in lending money to farmers and providing more traditional insurance type products. But what we want to do is build on those and try to make them better.
That's really interesting. You mentioned about the kind of warranty for new solutions. So is there that kind of, is there a lot of this governed by that vision of sustainability and a kind of healthier world and thinking about the kind of farmers' interests long term, for instance?
Well, Simon, I mentioned economics. Obviously, economics talks a lot about creating incentives because of scarcity or incentives because of supply and demand. And while there are a lot of reasons to have a warranty-backed plan that enables the sale of a product or a group of products, you mentioned sustainable ag. You can create incentives based on risk management for our farmers to adopt more sustainable practices. And again, there's a lot of talk right now about carbon and sustainable ag and regenerative ag. And what we seem to be missing is a little bit of traction there. And by working with the right partners, what we do, or what we hope to do, is bring economic incentives, economic rationale to the grower so that it makes sense to them from a bottom line and provides them some sort of upside, whether that's helping them manage risk or getting them easier, better access to capital. That's what we're trying to build.
No, it sounds great. It really does. And tell me, with something like the carbon, I've read so much about, carbon and the sequestration of carbon and farmers being paid for it. How much of the focus and solutions is geared towards that kind of situation or finding these new revenue streams for farmers?
Well, I do think it's important to find new revenue streams for farmers. It seems like every solution that comes out is asking for a couple more dollars per acre from every farmer and doesn't always deliver them back. And so that's actually one of the reasons why we came up with our warranty-backed concept, was to give farmers a little bit of peace of mind to try some of these new things. But as it relates to carbon specifically, I think there's a lot of activity right now on carbon. And I think especially with the new administration, and Secretary Vilsack back at the USDA, I think you're going to see a lot of activity there. I'm not sure we've landed yet on a solution. And by we, I mean the industry. I think there's a lot of really smart people trying to figure this out. And I have no doubt that a year or two from now, the landscape will be a lot different. What we like to say is, we're not the ones coming up with that. There's smart people figuring that out. We're not the ones that come up with sensors or drones or new biologics or things to add. What we can do is create the economic system behind those that either prevent the farmer from taking too much risk if they try them out, or getting them access to capital so that they can acquire those, follow the practice, et cetera. We really do believe that the economics behind this are what we're trying to bring to the industry, and we'll let there's some really smart people figuring that out. We'll just help them succeed, maybe more so than us.
Yeah, okay, that sounds great. And we were speaking earlier about your route to market being mainly through the kind of retailers. Just explain why that is and why that's the best route for you to go.
Well, obviously any startup has to focus. And so while I would love a website that sells our stuff direct, what we found is there's a pre-existing route to market there, and that's ag retail. These are companies and individuals that have been working in this space for, sometimes 100 years. And for us to come in and say, hey, we've got a better idea is probably a little bit presumptuous. And so if we can help them position their products better, if we can help them stay close to their customer, we don't have to recreate that. We don't need to disrupt that at all. In fact, I do think, going forward, while there's obviously economic pressure on the farmer in this environment, there's also a tremendous amount of pressure at that ag retail level. And so we really look forward to every time we get to speak to a retailer, because they are true experts in that market, and working with them, we think we can help solve some of the challenges that their grower customers face.
Yeah, absolutely, and offer and help them offer their customers more solutions as well.
That's exactly right. And again, these are we are building things that we really view are retailer agnostic. We want to go to big retailers. We want to go to small retailers. We want to work with sometimes even input manufacturers and go through ag retail. But clearly, we're going to be touching on that as a primary channel for us. And so when we think about other solutions we're building, and trust me, we've got a roadmap of possibilities here. We always look for, first, does it help the farmer? But second, will it also help that ag retailer maintain that relationship they have with their growers? We don't want to get in the way. In fact, we want to help them in any way possible to stay close and stay sticky to their customers.
Yeah, no, got it. That's great. And what do you see as the future? So you've been in this role for, am I right in thinking it's been a couple of years?
It's been 2 years, well, about 2 years and a month. So it's been a blast, and again, learning a lot every day. If you think you learn a lot every day in going to business school, just wait till you're put into a leadership role in a startup, because every day is like another course. But yeah, I've been in the role for about 2 years now, and a lot of really cool things happening in ag tech, Simon. I think the challenge here is getting the industry to really land on the ones that make a difference. And you might see some additional consolidation on both in both the big company side as well as the ag retail side, maybe startup sides. I think you see a lot of people looking at what I like to call the string of pearls strategy, where they're putting together a number of discrete startups into a type of business. That'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. But obviously, everyone you talk to has their own theories there. But I still think we're going through a change both at the company side and even the demographics of the farmer side. There's going to be a lot of change over the next 5 to 10 years in agriculture.
Really? I was going to say, surely from the big company perspective, there can't be any more consolidation. Surely we're just, there's 4 companies or three, 4 companies, of huge scale, and everyone else kind of, much smaller, basically. So
yeah, I don't think. Well, let's put it this way: there's a lot of new players now in agriculture that weren't in a meaningful market share position a few years ago. You've got some new incumbents from outside the U.S. that are starting to talk about making a pitch into the U.S. market as well, primarily because the U.S. market is really well set up for value capture, and other countries outside the U.S. are not as open. But even when you get to some of the more developing parts of the world where agriculture is really struggling to take hold as far as new tools, new technologies, digital ag, I think you're going to have a lot of new companies, new opportunities that come up, not just in Brazil, which is a massive market, or Asia, like China, which is a massive market, Europe, which continues to be really good from an agricultural perspective, but even developing parts of the world like Africa, I think has such a high ceiling as far as untapped potential. You're going to see parts of the world where innovation comes from that you might not have even thought about a couple of years ago, and it's going to be horribly exciting, I think, going forward.
Yeah, it's a really, it's an incredible kind of shifting landscape, isn't it? It really is. And but tell me, where would you see the future of Growers Edge? What are the longer term kind of goals and plans, and how do you see those playing out?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, especially if any of my team is listening, I think we really have to focus on delivering those two things that we're working on today: the warranty-backed crop plans and the lending arm, which again we're just launching now. Assuming we launch those, and if you think of agriculture as an ecosystem, we think the sky's the limit for us. We can bring in a lot of new tools and technologies on the fintech side, some of which are already out there. Again, when you think of mortgages and car loans, et cetera, that we can bring in, but underpinning both of those efforts, both on the warranty-backed plans that we design and the lending, is data analytics. And so while we don't tout it as a separate product, I think you will see every product that we come out with has a data analytics underpinning that puts us not just in a better position for that effort, but in a better position relative to our competitors. You're seeing an awful lot of companies out there that may be thinking about doing lending or thinking about whatever, but just know underneath that we're capturing data all the time, but public sources and private sources, to help deliver more value to the grower or to take away some of the downside risk of the grower. And again, really excited about using data in agriculture to develop our company as a fintech company that just happens to be focused in the ag sector. Really looking forward to that going forward.
Absolutely. It must be, when you're building the company, the multidisciplinary kind of skills that you must need to build this company are really varied and broad, basically. So that must be a challenge in itself, finding people from the different disciplines and bringing them all together.
It is, but again, you're always very fortunate that there are a lot of very smart people in agriculture. And so probably my biggest success over the first year of being CEO is bringing in the talent that we need to run those three parts of the business that I just mentioned: data, lending, and our warranty-backed crop plans. And that creates so much peace of mind with me that I have really good people in those seats that can deliver. But talent is always a challenge, probably for any startup, and agriculture is no different. We have to hire. We need more people. We are always looking for those folks that are excited to join a startup environment. But the search there is never done, Simon. We have to rely on people to help us sometimes find those roles. But if there is a challenge, and I think this is true, big company or small, if there's a challenge, talent is always at the top. You need the right people on the bus, and which I think was a phrase that Jim Collins in his Good to Great book wrote. You need the right people on the bus with you, and attracting talent, the right talent that is energetic, that has the right attitude, is really important going forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it really is, for sure. And how have you found, just from that personal viewpoint of coming from a big company background into a startup, right? And how have you found the personal adaptation and way of working, and the difference between how you were working before and how you work now, for instance?
Well, obviously, in a larger company, you have a lot of support. It never ceases to amaze me how smart and gifted the people were that I got to work with at Pioneer. Continue to rely on them occasionally when I have questions. And when I can, I'll attract and hire some of those folks inside, as well as others from other large companies. But I think that's one of those big changes. It's hard for some folks to make that switch, to go from a large company where you have communications people and IT people and sales folks and commercial roles and finance. And now you have to look for a little bit more general type people or people willing to learn. And so that's actually been one of the challenges for me mentally, is getting into the role and knowing that if I need to fix my printer, I got to do it myself. If I need to go and find and attract talent, I need to do that myself as well. And that's been one of those changes. And again, I know some folks that have made that switch and not had the right mindset. So I think having connections like even ours, yours and mine, the ability to tap access to talent, access to other experts in the industry is incredibly valuable going forward. And now sprinkle on top of that a little pandemic, and I wouldn't say it's been always upside, but every day is like a roller coaster, and roller coasters are fun. So as long as you like roller coasters, Simon, it's a great role. If you don't, then maybe take a different ride at the carnival. But it's certainly been a blast. I've enjoyed every day.
No, absolutely. I can tell as well. I can tell as well. No, that's great. Listen, it's been great conversation. Loved having you on, and wish you all the best on the onward journey. And it's been really interesting. So thanks very much for sharing.
No, again, thank you. It's very enjoyable to work with folks like yourself and the people that we have here at Growers Edge and the industry as a whole. Everyone's kind of leaning into a huge problem, and sometimes it's maybe overstated, but I don't think you can overstate it, and that is feeding the world. And it's a little bit easier to get up and do a job like this than maybe if you got up and made widgets. And so that's obviously one of the things that we always point to when trying to attract new talent is you're really addressing an important challenge, and it's an exciting one. So thanks for all you do, and certainly I think you've got a group of listeners that are focused on that problem as well. And so really want to express our appreciation for everything that you and the entire industry does to help solve that problem.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for that. Thanks very much, Dan. All the very best to you.